Generally, when I'm blocking, my workflow has 4 phases. Number 1, key posing. Number 2, extra keyframes. Number 3, timing. Number 4, assessment.
This is also the order that I stick to, at least for the first pass through my entire animation. So let's get started.
Blocking phase 1, key posing.
Blocking an animation is all about trying to sell a story or test an idea. The goal is to be rough and fast. Why? If you were animating in a studio, this helps you get approvals from your supervisors quickly without having a lot of changes to your shots later on. But this also helps you focus on the big picture and to avoid overwhelm. So you're not going into all the details like finger overlap vibrations or eye blinks. You're providing just the minimum amount of detail required for the story and the actions to read. And the best way to do that is with key poses.
Key poses are the most important poses in your animation. They clearly convey the key physical or emotional moments of your scene.
If one of these keys were removed, your entire animation would fall apart, or it would give off a drastically different feeling. That's how important they are. How do you determine your key poses then? Well, you refer to your planning, your reference, your storyboards, and your thumbnails. That's why the planning process is so important. And thankfully, from the last episode, we already have those planning materials. So first off, we're going to review our plan quickly, and we'll take a look at the storyboards first. So what am I looking at when I'm looking at my storyboard sketches and preparing to do the key poses? I'm saying, okay, I need key poses at each of these points for the harmonious lifting, the more forceful lifting, the angry breathing, the rage building, and maybe I'm breaking down like the in-betweens there. Who knows? Maybe it won't read right away. Or I can just have this particular pose here without the extra arm stuff. And I want to make sure that I hit all of these points that I have at least from my storyboard. And when I'm looking at these drawings, I'm also thinking, okay, I'm starting to prepare mentally of how I will key pose the differences between each moment in the animation. So the harmonious lift, the character is a little more, tilted back. He's more relaxed. I'm starting to think about how I might shape the spine, how there's only one arm involved. And then when the forceful lift happens, I'm going to make this, it's going to be differentiated. There's going to be a change in the pose because the character is going to lean forward more. He's going to get far more involved with his body. And there's going to be 2 hands now to show that there's more work. Even though the character's seated, I need to think about these changes quite a bit because there should be change throughout my animation. There should be change from key pose to key pose. And, as I mentioned that I'm starting to think about the spine. This will become more important later as I start to key this in. I'll be thinking about, do I want this shape since he's going to go from kind of like a reverse C to, here I've got a C drawing, but maybe I'll change that. Maybe it'll become more important that it's the opposite so that we get that kind of bend through the spine and we read that shape change as he goes from key pose to key pose. It gives us somewhere to go, right? So I'm thinking about those things as I'm looking at my storyboard. As I swap over to take a look at the reference, it's much the same. I'm just taking more note of all the little things that I do, like how I lean back here before I come forward into this harmonious force lift. I'm reading that there is, a rotate in the chest up for the breath. Maybe I will key that stuff, maybe I won't, but I'm starting to take note of all these little things that are in there and how I really start to lean forward and then the hand comes out. It's like maybe those breakdowns have become important. Parts like this where I kind of start closing off the hand and my head tilts with a strong emotion first. So I know that this moment I'll probably want to highlight before I get these hands up to prepare the antic for a more intense force lift forward, right? So I might want to key this in even though it wasn't in my storyboards. and I'll want to key holds here because I hold into this pose for a while and there's a lot of vibration going on. And that's something that I'll add much later down the road, past blocking, doing vibration through the hands and things. I'm also thinking in terms of beats. Right now, when I look at the angry breathing, I'm thinking, okay, do I really need all of the breaths that are in this reference? Can I sharpen it down to maybe 1, 2, 3 breaths, and I figure out like the tempo for those breaths? That's something that I'm going to need to sort out as I start blocking it all. How fast can I get into anger and have that build up and have that tempo without it being excessive? And that would save me more frames as I work my blocking. So as I look at my reference, these are the things that I'm thinking about just before I go in to start doing my key poses. And I'm going to keep this stuff to the side. Again, the drawings, the reference, all to the side on my second monitor. So I can constantly look back at what happened for the reference or what my drawing was dictating, that the pose should do as I start blocking things. Now that we've reviewed the plan, we're ready to start setting keys. We've identified those key poses. We're ready to open our shot and start putting those frames in.
This is where most of your effort in blocking will be spent. Keep your reference and sketches handy, preferably on a second monitor while you animate. As you set your key poses, you should constantly bounce back and forth between your planning and your character's pose, asking yourself several questions along the way. Does this key pose read in the camera view? Does this pose also read from the side and the front view? Is this key pose appealing? Does the character look broken at all? How can I push this pose so it's even more exaggerated? Where is the weight? In this phase, you're essentially a digital sculptor. You're considering all major parts of the body, getting detailed with just the pose itself. You're thinking about the position of the hips, the tilt and the twist in the chest, the line of the action throughout the body, whether the shoulders are up or down. You're thinking, how do I use all of these body parts to communicate a clear emotion with just the body language? Why do you detail a pose this much in the blocking? Well, you know that these key poses will be the ones seen the most by your audience. And you know that all the animation later will be based on this. The core of your story is essentially in your key poses. What you can and should skip for now, though, is the face. Just add some rough facial expressions to save time. If you prefer, you could also skip out on the finger and toe poses to keep it simple and to work a little faster. As you move on from key pose to key pose, it can be really tempting to figure out the timing, to figure out how many frames a movement will take. There are several approaches to keep this simple in your key posing, so you're not too caught up in the timing just yet. You could set a new key every 8 frames as a rough general rule. You could let your reference be your guide, basically just copying the timing that your reference has without thinking about it too much. Or you could completely forget about the timing altogether and set a key on every frame and just plan to slide those keys around later as a separate part of your workflow. With this Jedi shot, we're using the reference to guide the rough timing, and there's some on-the-fly guesswork based on experience. If you're new to animating, I recommend either letting reference guide you or forgetting about the timing completely for now. Blocking phase 2, extra keyframes. As this Jedi scene is blocked out, you'll see that again and again there are these extra frames getting put into the blocking. Throughout the shot, anticipations and breakdowns are being keyed to visually note how a character will move to another pose. Moving holds are keyed, so later we don't forget the character is supposed to stay relatively still for this moment. IK and FK swaps are being planned for when the hands rest on the knees and they come off. That way, as we keep animating, we aren't fighting the character rig to get what we want, and we're getting animation essentially for free, right, by using the most of the IK and the FK. But all of these extra keys will be refined a lot more in Blocking Plus, so don't get carried away. Blocking phase 3. After setting key poses throughout the entire shot, you're ready for phase 3. Here you're moving all of your keyframes around to rough out how long each movement will take. You're asking yourself these questions. Would any of these movements read better if I change the timing? Does this move need more frames or less? Do we see this key pose enough or too much? Should this hold longer or shorter? Then you slide your keys around and test out that timing. No matter how you chose to set your key poses, whether you were letting your reference guide you or you were completely waiting until now to decide your timing, this is a fairly fast process. Overall, by separating timing from your posing in this blocking workflow that you have, you'll have less overwhelm with the animation. Essentially, because you'll be solving one problem at a time. So it'll be easier, and as a result, you'll block faster. That said, if you're new to animation, this is a great blocking workflow for you. With more experience under your belt, you'll get more comfortable with adjusting your timing and posing together instead of separately. Blocking phase 4, assessment. The assessment phase is just like it sounds. You play blast or play through your entire animation on Maya and assess your entire shot so far. You already know your animation is rough. You already know there are a lot of keys that you need to add. That's not what you should be assessing. As you're watching your animation here, the questions you should ask yourself are, what moments of my animation are super rough? What moments of my animation are reading clearer than the rest? As you ask yourself these questions, take notes. Physical notes are usually best in case you forget your mental ones. Then, based on the answers, the notes that you took, set priority. What is the most important moment in your animation to fix next? Generally, the most important moments to fix are the super rough moments that don't read that well at all. They're the most important because they're dragging down the rest of your animation. They just don't look as good or as clear as the rest of your animation. In this case, with the Jedi, the moment that could use the most love is the beginning. The peaceful, calm attempt to lift the rock at the start is not reading as well as the rest of the shot. The ending has a lot of detail in comparison when he gets hit by the rock. It's just much further along. So that is the next part of the animation to keep fleshing out, both in terms of key poses and in timing. What workflow do you follow then at this point? You cycle back through all 4 phases: key posing, extra keyframes, timing, and assessment. Once that rough section is caught up to speed, you can move on to the next priority note. In the end, with each pass, your animation gets more and more fleshed out, and you'll naturally transition from a blocking state to a blocking plus state,
which is the perfect place to wrap this episode. Thank you so much for watching. In the next episode, we'll take this animation through the blocking plus, adding a lot more keys, sharpening up all the movements so the story reads even better. If you're looking for other animation tutorials, podcasts, ultimate guides about the art, and so much more, visit rustyanimator.com. Or maybe you'd rather follow along with me until the next episode of trying to do your own animation. Will you use what you learned to block out your own Star Wars animation right now? Time will tell. Until next time, happy animating, and may the Force be with you.